You probably already realize this, but there's a beautiful silver tray of chocolate prasad here offered below your feet in front of the harmonium here.
Can I eat it all?
Sure. I actually was wondering if you would speak to us as you start your talk here today about the tradition of prasad and the blessing that goes into it from your perspective and what we receive as we receive this prasad later today.
Imagine that you are the creator of the entire universe. It is a hard concept because we can't even, in a sense, get control over the mind. It's interesting, my greatest wish for you would be liberation, but in a sense, is it your wish? The mind continuously gives you false information. Nowhere along the line do we actually say, is the mind truly my identity? Or is the mind simply but emotions and feelings and chemical reactions? And if I move beyond the mind, could I experience liberation? But as long as the mind continuously defines whom you are, then what can we do? Prasad is a wonderful way to bestow blessings that you find a motion, or I should say a moment of subtle consciousness. We don't experience the Kundalini, we don't experience the discovery of our inner self. Why someone hitting a hammer over our head, we begin to experience the inner self in the subtlest ways. We create a brick road, one tapestry after another, until eventually we weave a path of constant grace. Prasad is a way in which food is infused by the grace as everything is God. And when food is infused with the blessings, and when a person chooses to take this, they are subtly reminded that what they are taking in is pure grace, as they are pure grace. For centuries, the mind has plagued mankind. There was a time when the mind became a great instrument. The mind can actually become your greatest ally. If we sit within the center of the mind and allow emotions to be our reality, then we are our own enemy. We create enemies. We create addictions. We create fears and anxieties. We live on the edge of never experiencing peace. We live on the edge of never experiencing God. It's like living on the edge where we're about to jump off a cliff, because our mind always lives in such stress. Stress is one of the greatest epidemics, one of this century. Fear, stress, not having the ability to see the truest self of ourself, not the self through the perception of the mind, but the self that lies within. Fear is a way in which the mind, the ego, continuously takes control. If you were a shopkeeper, would you let a stranger walk into your shop and create chaos? Why do we speak up? Because we don't want this and we don't like that, and I want this and I don't want that. Why are we so consumed by everything? Instead of, is the ego not a stranger that enters the mind and causes chaos? Isn't the ego a destructive cycle of behavior that creates illusion and maya and destruction? So why is it that we can be so outspoken when we drive a car or walk down the street or make a judgment about another human being, and yet we allow total havoc. We allow emotions to identify us. Emotion is a chemical reaction that tells us and indicates us. It is a guide that tells us what is happening. We go to places for information, but why is it that we allow the mind to develop our identity, and yet the mind, we experience emotions? If we look upon the mind simply as a guide that brings us thoughts and feelings and emotions but does not define us, but indicates to us who, what, when, and where, instead of the identity of the self. I am not happy. I am want change. I don't like this. I am not heard. Yet we make such a strong statements. These are all due to the lack of knowing the inner self. Not being seen, not being heard, not being listened to are complete reflections of a lack of understanding the mind. And indeed is a complete reflection of not understanding the inner self. I'm sure that as Bart has repeated over and over, the inner self we don't become, we are the inner self already. We don't merge, we become it, we realize it. We realize it, we acknowledge it. The inner self, like Kundalini, is not a linear or a clinical experience. We experience the inner self through subtle shifts of consciousness. We experience the Kundalini, we experience the inner self through the subtlest of consciousness. Within that silence, within falling into pure grace, do we shift from one limited perception to a greater perception, to a greater perception, to a greater perception, until the tapestry have woven together and we experience the origin in where we come from. As long as the mind defines whom we are and we have a false identity when it comes to the collective. We define ourselves, but what lies around us instead of what lies within us. We define ourselves by culture, by religion, by advertisement, by consumption, by consumerism. We define ourselves continuously by the cultural influences and where we come from. As an individual, we have lost the sense of what is called the individual self. One must become a mad lover of the Kundalini, a mad lover of finding the self. If one sits within meditation without direction and purpose, it is like a chicken cut off without a head. We are not liberating ourselves. We're just cock-a-doodle-doo. Neither going here nor going there, just going in circles. But when we become a seeker is an individual that is a yogi, is a siddha, a seeker of the truth, a seeker of the discovery. If I do not see myself as a yogi, see myself as a siddha, then I am an ordinary being and an ordinary experience because I define myself what is around me.